Hey guys, thank you for watching the SlatRock channel. If you haven't already, please check out our previous video, the top 10 WWE superstars we wish had a longer career in wrestling. Some wrestlers go the extra mile in helping to get their character over with the fans, and then there are these people, wrestlers whose actions bordered on insanity. Here are 15 incredible stories of wrestlers' dedication to their characters. Number 15. Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was famous for keeping kayfabe even within his own family. On WWE's Rise and Fall of the NWO documentary, Cody Rhodes talks about watching his father, a member of the notorious heel faction, attacking babyface Rey Mysterio Jr. and having the Dream maintain kayfabe even to his own son when replying to him. Not only that, but when Cody was upset that his father joined the NWO in the first place, well, everyone else in WCW had joined the NWO by that point, Dusty was forced by his wife to tell his child what was really going on because he'd refused to break kayfabe to reassure his own son. Number 14. Haku. Tonga Fifita, aka Haku and Ming, is known in the industry as a guy you don't want to piss off. Jake the Snake Roberts famously said, "If I had a gun and was sitting inside a tank with one shell left, and Ming is 300 yards away, he's mine, right? Well, the first thing I'm gonna do is jump out of the tank and shoot myself because I don't want to wound that son of a bitch and have him pissed off at me." On March 3rd, 1989, Fifita got into an altercation with some men at the Baltimore airport who had called wrestling fake, and during the fight, Fifita bit off the nose of one of the men. This is what Haku had to say about the incident. "Yeah, it was in Baltimore airport. There was a hotel there. We're staying at another hotel, the Marriott or something. There was another hotel there though. It was hopping all the time. The music was playing, it was packed. It was during the week, I believe. Me and Siva Afi went over and there were lots of baby faces there at the bar, so we went and sat in another corner away from them. When they were ready to close, we had a few drinks and on our way out, there were 5 guys just sitting there. Of course, the same thing came out, the fake stuff. Hey, are you those guys? Wrestlers? The fake wrestlers on TV? You know, I said, yeah, I'll show you. And I reached over without thinking. There are 4 other guys there. Grabbed his face and bit his nose off. Then the fight started. Me and Siva kinda cleaned house there and left. I'll never forget it. I was able to get food on the table because of wrestling, and I had to make the first move because wrestling was considered real back then. I would have kicked their ass even if I was injured. Number 13. James Myers. Intelligent, well-spoken James Myers worked as a physical education teacher at a high school in Madison Heights, Michigan. During the summers, however, he worked another job to supplement his income. He would travel to New York and wrestle as George the Animal Steele. The Animal, as his name suggests, was a crazy, unpredictable wild man who would tear apart turnbuckles with his teeth and grunt monosyllabically. He went on to have a very successful career in the WWF and even earned himself a role alongside Johnny Depp in Tim Burton's Ed Wood. And as far as anyone else was concerned, James Myers and George the Animal Steele were 2 completely separate individuals. That's right, for 20 years, Myers never once acknowledged that he was the Animal, and nobody around him knew he was a famous wrestler in his off hours. This wouldn't be possible today, obviously. The internet would track him down within 30 seconds. However, back in the 1970s, the internet didn't exist, and the wrestling business was divided into separate territories. Detroit had its own territory, and so did New York, which is where Myers would make all his appearances as the Animal. The only way anyone in his home state could ever see him as George the Animal Steele would be in a wrestling magazine. Or, you know, if they drove to New York. Number 12. The Great Sasuke. The Great Sasuke was not the first Japanese wrestler to hold political office, with Antonio Inoki, Hiroshi Hase, and Atsushi Onita preceding him. He did, however, become the first masked legislator after being elected to the Owaiti Prefectural Assembly in 2003 and still not taking his mask off. Number 11. Ted DiBiase. Vince McMahon went to great lengths to protect the on-screen character of the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, including having him roll around in a limo with valets anytime he was seen in public, and even allegedly giving him $1,000 a day to blow just so he could be seen doing it. Here's what DiBiase said about Vince pitching him the $1 Million Man gimmick. "I flew my wife and I first class to New York, and he laid out the whole idea behind the $1 Million Man. He said that one thing everybody hates is the man who, by virtue of his wealth, thinks he can buy anyone or anything. Then Vince said, in order to make the public believe you're really rich, we're going to fly you first class. You'll have limousine service every day, and every time the public sees you, they'll see the appearance of wealth. It even went further. He even went so far as to give me lash cash. I'd pick my spots and go into a restaurant, announce myself, and tell everyone it was their lucky day because the $1 Million Man had arrived. Virgil would pick up everyone's check, I'd slap down the 100 bills, and the WWE office would replenish me after I gave them the receipt. Number 10. Nikita Koloff. Minnesota native Nelson Simpson reportedly was on the verge of a tryout with the upstart football league, the USFL, when his friend Road Warrior Animal told him of an opportunity to wrestle in Jim Crockett Promotions. Simpson took the shot with wrestling, becoming wrestling legend Ivan Koloff's storyline nephew, complete with Russian accent. Simpson got a huge push as a monster heel, quickly becoming a top star in the Mid-Atlantic promotion as his heel character played off real-life Cold War fears in the mid-80s. Behind the scenes, Nikita maintained kayfabe at all times, refusing to speak English, reportedly learning the Russian language, traveling with an English translator, and legally changing his name to Nikita Koloff. Nikita would speak a handful of words in English during his early days as a grappler, eventually dropping the Russian accent 2 years after retiring in 1992. Reportedly, Nikita's obsession with living his gimmick rubbed some of his colleagues the wrong way. But that didn't stop him from staying in character. Koloff continues to use his wrestling name in his religious ministry, Koloff for Christ. Number 9. The Ultimate Warrior. Jim Hellwig wowed the wrestling world with his incredible physique and the charismatic persona he crafted as the Ultimate Warrior. While the Ultimate Warrior was unable to replace Hulk Hogan as the WWF's #1 superstar, he maintained a main event presence throughout his career. What fans may not know is that the Ultimate Warrior character became a large part of Jim Hellwig's personality. This became apparent when Hellwig legally changed his name to Warrior. The Warrior sued the WWF for the right to use his name, scoring a big win over the wrestling empire in 1996, which allowed him rights to his name and likeness. It also resulted in Warrior's wife Dana and their daughters Indiana and Madigan carrying the surname Warrior. Number 8. Sabu. Terry Brunk carried on his uncle the Sheik's legacy of an Arabian madman, working in some of the wildest matches ever seen and immediately setting himself apart from the other stars of Paul Heyman's Extreme Championship Wrestling. Part of Sabu's gimmick was that he did not speak, creating an additional layer of mystique to his character. However, in 1994, Chris Benoit accidentally broke Sabu's neck in the ring, leading to Sabu being hospitalized. Despite the severity of his injury, Sabu refused to speak to the medical personnel, maintaining silence for several hours until Paul Heyman served as his translator. However, it became clear Sabu would have to break silence if he wanted to be treated, and he did so reluctantly. Fast forward to 1997, and Sabu stunned the world when he spoke English, calling Taz a fucking midget. If this isn't enough, consider Sabu once taped his broken jaw shut so he could work a full match. Number 7. El Santo. Lucha Libre sensation El Santo lived a remarkable life, achieving legendary status as Mexico's top wrestling hero as well as a film star, comic book hero, and more. In Lucha Libre, a luchador's mask is more than ornamentation. It's a cherished possession every wrestler fights to keep. In El Santo's case, he guarded his silver mask like Superman guards his secret identity. El Santo wore the mask whenever possible, from his ring debut in 1934 to his death 50 years later. On rare occasions when he had to unmask, such as traveling via airplane, El Santo made sure he traveled separately from his colleagues. El Santo safeguarded his identity for 42 years, even after retirement. El Santo finally unmasked on Mexican television in January 1984, only to suffer a fatal heart attack a week later. The legendary luchador was buried in his mask, another sign of his dedication to his craft. Number 6. Mr. Wrestling. Ric Flair fans are probably aware of the 1975 plane crash involving several wrestlers from Jim Crockett Promotions and announcer David Crockett. The plane crash, caused by inadequate fuel levels, nearly ended the Nature Boy's career, and did end the career of wrestler Johnny Valentine. Tim, Mr. Wrestling Woods, was aboard the plane as well, and while he wasn't as hurt as the others, he was still in bad shape. Woods' presence on the small plane presented a problem, as he was the only babyface wrestler aboard the flight. The business could be ruined if fans discovered a top babyface was traveling with some of the promotion's biggest villains. Woods tried to protect his identity by disclosing his real name and claiming to be a promoter. However, as rumors swirled Mr. Wrestling was aboard the plane, it was clear something had to be done. Thus, Mr. Wrestling got back in the ring 2 weeks after the accident. Woods' dedication to the business protected kayfabe even as he risked his health by returning far too early. Number 5. Vader. Wrestling fans know the difference between wrestling being fake and it being scripted. However, the general public often fails to see the distinction, occasionally paying for their ignorance with a beatdown, such as when reporter John Stossel asked David Schultz if wrestling was fake. The surly Schultz slapped the daylights out of the ABC reporter, replying, "You think this is fake?" A similar incident occurred when The Undertaker and Vader appeared on the show Good Morning Kuwait in 1997. When the show's host, Bassam Al-Othman, dropped the other F-bomb, Vader exploded, knocking over a table and clutching Bassam's throat, shouting, "Does this feel fake? Does it?" Even the dead man, who was sitting there, couldn't do anything. While the spectacle was reportedly a publicity stunt, Bassam wasn't filled in, and Vader spent a weekend in jail, refusing to admit the affair was a setup. Vader was also banned for 10 years from Kuwait, but there's no confirmation if this was based on the incident or something else. Number 4. Goldust. It's hard to believe Dustin Rhodes' Goldust character debuted in 1995, but over 2 decades later, he still lives up to the nickname The Bizarre One. Even more bizarre is the story of how Dustin approached Vince McMahon with an indecent proposal. According to Vince Russo, Dustin told McMahon he would get breast implants in exchange for a $1 million payoff. Whether this showed Goldust's dedication to his character or the Bizarre One looking for a big payday, we may never know. What we do know is Mr. McMahon passed on the idea after serious contemplation, apparently preferring breast implants on his female wrestlers as opposed to his male. Number 3. Bray Wyatt. Some fans are still mystified by Wyndham Rotunda's transformation from Husky Harris to Bray Wyatt. The Eater of Worlds gimmick of a backwoods cult leader wowed fans with its intensity and seeming authenticity, largely due to Wyndham immersing himself in his character, living the role 24/7. Reportedly, Dusty Rhodes told Wyndham to take things to the next level when Wyndham was assigned jury duty. Wyndham went to jury duty in his Bray Wyatt outfit, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and straw hat, and maintaining the Bray Wyatt character as he sat on a jury. At least, that's the story according to John Robinson's book, NXT: The Future Is Now. What we'd like to know is whether the lights went out when Bray entered the courtroom and whether he was permitted to sit in a rocking chair. Number 2. The Sandman. In 1994, the Sandman, aka James Fullington, battled Tommy Dreamer in a brutal I Quit match that culminated in Sandman's kayfabe blinding after a lit cigarette was flicked into his eye. In the best-selling WWE video, The Rise and Fall of ECW, Paul Heyman discussed how far Fullington went to sell the angle. After announcing his retirement from the ring, the Sandman became a recluse, avoiding public contact and undoubtedly consuming a large amount of beer from the comfort of his home. Reportedly, Sandman had his wife answer the door for him, and when he did venture out into the mean streets of Philadelphia, he had his eyes heavily bandaged. Number 1. The Wild Samoans. Are there any Samoan wrestlers in wrestling not related to Afa and Sika? Well, that's a question for another day. Consider how dedicated the 2 Samoan brothers were to protecting kayfabe. Afa and Sika portrayed 2 savage Samoan natives, eating raw fish on TV, and ripping dead chickens apart during interviews to convey their brutal nature. Behind the scenes, they spoke perfect English and were well liked by their peers. In his autobiography, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the Immortal One recalls an incident where he was traveling with Afa and Sika in the 80s, only to be pulled over by a New Jersey state trooper. Unfortunately for the Hulkster, he had an unregistered handgun in his car, and the gun fell out of his glove box at this opportune time, setting Hogan up for a run in Con College. Hogan pleaded with the Samoans to help out, knowing the gun was his and not theirs. Bear in mind, this is when kayfabe was still intact. Thus, Afa and Sika refused to speak English, joining Hogan in the paddy wagon. Eventually, Afa and Sika were released, and reportedly the WWF had to call in some favors to make Hogan's gun charge disappear. There you have it, folks. 15 wrestlers who stopped at nothing to get their characters and/or storylines over and maintain kayfabe. What do you think of them? Be sure to leave your comments below and like our video. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any videos from your friends at the SlatRock channel.